Norton used to leave for work about 6:15. I usually got up with him around 5:30. But this particular morning I didn't. And he came in and I said, I thought he was going to kiss me goodbye. And I said, oh, you're leaving? And he said, I don't feel well. I brought him out in here and he was in terrible pain. I called my daughter and I called the man across the street. And I dialed 911. Norton sat in the chair over on the right, to my right here, and for some reason, I was kneeling on the floor, just about where you're sitting. And we were waiting. I was waiting for Chris to come from across the street and for the ambulance to come. And Norton said, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And that was the last thing he said in this room.
But even with 6, almost 7 months to say goodbye and talk, I stopped working. I stayed at home for that entire period of time. We talked almost non-stop and forever. And there's still not enough time to say goodbye and, relive the happy times and imagine the times that were ahead. I was quite unprepared when my wife actually died in mid-December. I was quite unprepared for the incredible feelings of loss and loneliness and a wide array of other emotions, all quite horrible and all for which I had no previous experience or coping abilities.
My son was really a very healthy kid, it seemed, but he came home and he said he had the flu. He wasn't feeling well. He went out and got himself some flu medicine over the counter and went to bed early taking the flu medicine. And I didn't think any more about it. Naturally, he was 16 years old and he could take care of himself. He was almost 17, in fact. And the next day I tried to wake him up and I couldn't wake him up. He was dead. And I called the 911 immediately. I didn't realize he was dead, of course. I was just in a state of shock and panic. And the more the emergency people worked on him, the more it became clear that it didn't look good. And they took him to Stanford Hospital. And I guess my own reaction at that time was I was in total shock. I was pacing the room, the house, and I couldn't face the fact that he could just suddenly be gone. It was very difficult to face that. I had never had to deal with things like that in my life.
You don't learn in school anything useful about preparing for these inevitable crises of life. You learn trivial stuff, and the most devastating and important event of your life, which is the loss of the person you most love, is something for which you left entirely unprepared.
One is alone in one's grief. It's amazing how one can be alone in one's grief. And that goes on for many years, I think. It certainly hasn't stopped being that way for me, even though I've made many attempts and I've really worked on trying to communicate that loneliness. It's hard.
The most painful thing, I think, of all was not when I took the children in to see him before we left the hospital, but walking into my kitchen with my 5 children who hadn't been together for 10 years, but I was alone. I was that moment, as I walked into the kitchen and sat down, a light went out, which I don't think will ever go back on.
One thing that I found very hard, I had no experience of this kind. I had no idea what a normal process of grief was. Nothing in what I read, and I read very widely, prepared me for what it would feel. There were days when I was just immobilized by depression, when I could barely get out of bed. There were days when I just would get out of bed, turn on some music, sit back down on my bed to listen to the piece of music, and then wake up 6 or 7 hours later, where I was sleeping incredible spells, 15 hours a day.
Strange things, I would walk through the house and say, here are his clothes, and I'm supposed to iron his clothes, and take these clothes away. I can't deal with this now. He's not going to need them anymore. This immediate strange things that one says. And afterwards I kept thinking, gee, why on earth would I focus on something so trivial?
It's the only word I can think to use, is a total numbness. I was totally depressed, but I really had no feeling. And people would say, are you afraid of being in the house on your own? Could somebody get in? And I felt like saying, I wish they could. And, I didn't want to live even. I couldn't see any point in living. I couldn't. Looking back now, some of the feelings and the thoughts I had seemed so ridiculous. If I saw an older man walking along, I felt like hitting him because he had no right to be alive when Norton wasn't. Nobody had the right to enjoy life.
The children's birthdays, my birthday without her was a terrible day for me. Her birthday, birthday of my children, our anniversary, Christmas. I mean, it's like a series of alarms that go off, and each of these dates spent in this new way alone is just a horrible tearing open of the wound again.
When you have get-together, sometimes just sitting down for dinner in the beginning was very hard because there was an empty chair. When we would go out as a family, there was one missing, always. We'd go out on a trip or something. When we had fun, that's hard to think of, is that you're having fun and it's missing. You would have had fun too, and you can't. So that's difficult. And that makes the whole experience of grief so hard. The fact that you can't enjoy your fun, you can't enjoy your pleasurable outings the way you used to because you feel guilty or because the missing child isn't there.
And then there'd be alternatively times when a few days would go by. This was after some months after her death, when I suddenly, in fact, the whole issue of my loss simply was out of mind, and I was busy teaching or busy writing or whatever. And then I felt that, what a terrible person I must be that I'm not thinking about this, that I'm not, experiencing grief as a continuous emotion. I thought, what a superficial, unloyal person I am, that she isn't still the primary focus of all of my energies and all of my mental processes.
And slowly it dawned on me that, in fact, if I was always under emotional stress and wasn't working it through and wasn't working through the pain that was always underlying my feelings, I wouldn't be able to function as a person in the family or in the environment, whatever I was doing. So while it is extremely painful to work through these experiences and to go through them over and over again, it's also very important.
I don't think if you've really lost someone you love that you can just, in fact, walk away from it and forget it. I think one needs to confront it, and I think men especially need help in confronting it, because men are taught, grit your teeth, go on, be tough, be resilient, be macho. Real men don't cry. That kind of crap, which I think is very, very destructive.
It's almost as if you were isolated. You can see out, but you can't really reach the world. And for someone to come through to you somehow and understand you, that's extremely important. To have someone to make that connection between your isolation and the world. And often the family will not be able to do that. I mean, the family is extremely important, I think, but one is alone in one's grief. It's amazing how one can be alone in one's grief.
There's a limit to how much one can talk to one's own children, or to my aged father-in-law, or to my wife's sister, or to my brother. And there's very few other family members left. And my friends, you just simply, you really can't impose that much on friends because they have their own loss, their own lives, their own pain, their own whatever.
I think the sort of person you need is somebody who's very warm and somebody who likes you, who's fond of you, but not part of the family. I think you need somebody outside the family. You need somebody who is detached enough that they can talk, you can talk to them, but they're detached enough that these things are not part of their life. And so they can be detached and give you counseling and comfort.
It is as if you were really sick at that time. And it would be very helpful to have someone treat you that way. Not force it on you, but gently ask you, perhaps it would be better if you did that or this or the other. To allow you to just be with your grief or with your falling apart. Because in this world we haven't got much time to fall apart. It's always, be together.
It's like a wound that has to heal from the inside out. And the healing is never totally there. But you don't expect that. You're just grateful for the fact that some of the pain, or most of the pain, has dissipated. Now I can feel at times that I can say, do you see what's happening to us, Norton? We are managing.
You need the sense that someone is there who understands this process and can help to make it more bearable or less painful by putting what you're feeling in some kind of perspective and telling you that the range of emotions you're feeling, both the highs and the lows, the remembrances and the forgetting, are all perfectly normal. That there is no right or wrong way to grieve. That one shouldn't feel guilty if one isn't thinking about the loss all the time. It's very important to have someone tell you that it's okay to go on living.